Hey everyone, welcome back to RetroBreak. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We're doing another tier list, but instead of games, I'm actually going to be ranking the cartridges themselves. This was an idea that was given to me a while back now by someone called Lightshift4200, so thank you very much for the idea. And let's get started with a random cartridge here. Let's start off with a PC Engine Hue card. So these are for the NEC PC Engine, and they're very, very thin cards. As you can see here, they're basically like a credit card or just a few credit cards stacked next to each other. They do have exposed pins at the top, but I really like the design. It's really easy to have a big stack of them together. So for example, I've got a bunch of loose ones right here, and they barely take up any space. They're definitely the easiest to store. Probably out of any of the game cards, maybe save for DS games, although I don't really like to store DS games loose, but we'll get to that a bit later on. One other thing to mention about these cards before we move on is the fact that they also come with these plastic protective sleeves as well. So if you are worried about damaging the card because of these metal pins here, you can actually use these plastic protectors to store them in so that the pins don't actually get damaged. And then when you want to use it, you can just slide them out like that. So where am I going to rate the PC Engine Hue card? I think I'm going to give this an A. It's a really nice card. It has a lot of space for a really nice piece of artwork on the front, and it's very easy to store as well. All right, next, let's take a look at this one here, which is for the Virtual Boy. And I actually really like the Virtual Boy cartridges. They're quite big, especially compared to something like the Game Boy Advance there, or the original Game Boy. They're basically like 1.5 Game Boy games. But because of that, you actually get a really nice big piece of artwork on the front, and it looks quite nice. Obviously it is bright red, and maybe the label could have taken up more space on the front. I also love the fact that they come with these protectors here to protect the pins underneath. And even if you don't have the protector, the pins aren't actually exposed anyway, so they don't really risk damaging them like you do with some of the other ones that we'll cover a bit later on. They also, on the back, have a nice little grip there so that you can put your thumb or finger into it and actually pull them out of the system quite easily, and they're actually quite durable as well despite their thin size. So I'm actually going to give this one an A rank as well. I just realised I might need to start being a little bit harsher on these, else they're all going to get A and S ranks, but there are a few that I don't like. Anyway, let's pick out the next one, which in this case is going to be for the original Game Gear. And the Game Gear actually has a very similar cartridge to the Virtual Boy. There's not much difference in the size between them. They both have more or less the same size label for the game as well. In fact, I would actually argue that the Game Gear one is slightly better due to that extra ridge at the top there. There is one downside to it though, and because it sticks out the front, you can't actually stack them on top of each other, which is a problem I've got because I have a bunch on the shelf and it starts tipping forward like that and eventually it will just fall over. Whereas with the Virtual Boy games, they are completely flat, so you can stack them up. Not that there's enough Virtual Boy games out there to make them fall over anyway. So what am I going to do with Game Gear? I suppose because of what I said there, it has to be in the same rank, so this is getting A as well. Alright, let's pick one that I know I'm going to give a bad score to. Can you guess what this one is? Just from the look of it, it's a boring grey cartridge, and the front isn't much better. This is a cartridge for the Commodore 64, and I have to say this is one of the worst designs that I've ever seen. I've got a bunch of these, and all of them just have these white labels with just blue text and no picture, and just a logo there of the different company. It's well built, I mean, it's solid, but with this colour plastic, it's just going to age over time and not look very good at all, so I really don't have much more to say about it. I'm going to give this one a D. So let's check out a more interesting console now. This is the Vectrex, and I quite like the Vectrex cartridges. They're quite chunky. They have a very basic design on the front though, but they do feel quite sturdy, although it does rattle a bit now I'm saying that. And it does look very, very 1983, so I don't really think I can rate it that highly just because of how incredibly basic it is. But I do think it's a good shape and it's a good size, and it fits into the machine quite nicely as well. So I'm going to give the Vectrex cartridge here a C, I think. Now for a Sega console, let's start off with the Sega Master System, and I'm sure you can guess where I'm going to place this one. These are by far the worst cartridge for any video game system ever made. They're just blank black plastic with a small red sticker with the name and the Sega logo in the corner, and that's literally it. These are by far my least favourite, and probably a lot of you watching agree with this as well, so this is going right in the E tier, or whatever's right at the bottom of the list. Let's move on to the Game Boy Advance next, and this is one of my favourites. I think this is the perfect size for a handheld console that allows the console to be small enough, but also allows for a nice little bit of artwork and a nice ridge at the top to pull the game out as well. It's about half the size of an original Game Boy cartridge, as you can see, and it really is perfect. You can't really lose it because it's just big enough to be able to not fit through small gaps and things, unlike DS games, which are just way too small in my opinion. So I am actually going to give Game Boy Advance games an S rank. Let's do DS and 3DS now. They're both more or less the same, except the 3DS games have a little bit extra there so they don't fit inside the original DS system. And I'm not really a massive fan of them. I mean, I do like them, but at the same time, they are quite easy to lose. In fact, I have actually lost some in the past. Although, it did mean that I could amass a massive collection of them and actually store them all outside the boxes. So, although I don't think they're as good as the Game Boy or Game Boy Advance cartridges that came before them, they are an impressive piece of technology, and they're still impressive to look at today. I'm going to give them a B, I think. So now we've done the DS and 3DS, let's do the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color. They're both exactly the same size, and they both have the same size label, so I'll put these two in the same category, but I do really like the Game Boy Color's cartridges with the see-through design where you can see the PCB on the inside. The Game Boy ones do stack slightly nicer because they're actually flat on the top instead of slightly raised up like the Game Boy Color ones are, but honestly it's not too much of a problem to stack them like that either. It's not like the Game Gear where they're going to tip over straight away. So I'm going to give these both an A rank. I think they're a perfect size for a cartridge, and you also get some really nice artwork on the front as well. And I loved in the old house with my display cabinet being able to display all of these games. They're just the perfect size to sort of have on display and look at the amazing, really colourful artwork on these games too. So they're both getting an A from me. Actually, I changed my mind, they're getting an S. Okay, two interesting handhelds now. We have the Nokia N-Gage and we have the Gizmondo. And yeah, these are basically just SD cards. They're really not very exciting at all. I'll show them on the overhead camera there, but yeah, these are getting a D. There's really nothing special about them at all. The quality isn't great. The N-Gage games have a little sort of holographic thing on the side, but really, they're just memory cards with the game name on, so they're really probably the least interesting out of the entire bunch, to be honest. Next is the NES, and I just absolutely love these cartridges. There's a massive space on the front for the game artwork. There's plenty of space down the side to grip it and pull it out of the machine without having to worry about it. The downside is that sometimes it doesn't actually get read very well by the system, but that's not a fault of the cartridge itself. And also, quite a rarity here in the UK, it actually has the game name on the top as well, so you can stack these sideways on the shelf and still see the name of the game as well. So without a doubt, the original NES cartridge here is going in the S rank. So we've done the NES, now I guess it's time to do the SNES, or the Super Famicom, and I've got both versions here. I've got the PAL or Japanese version at the top, and I've got the American version at the bottom, and maybe I'm going to be slightly controversial here, but I actually prefer the American version. For one thing, like I said about the NES games, it has the name of the game at the top. If we go on the overhead camera, you can see it a bit better. So you can actually see what the game is. They're also square instead of rounded, which means that they actually stack a lot nicer. And as you can see, they sort of roll around on top of each other. And they just feel nicer to hold as well. Not that I really have any downsides with the PAL or Japanese version, apart from not having the label at the top. They're both equally as well built, but I just prefer the look and feel of the American one, so I'm going to give the American one an A, and I'm going to give the Japanese and the PAL version a B. Let's look at the N64 next, and this is definitely one of my favourites. There's a really nice big area on the front for the artwork, and it keeps the information about the game relatively small at the bottom, so there's loads of space there for the title and the character in the background. It feels incredibly well made, probably the best that Nintendo's ever done, and the pins at the bottom don't shake or anything, which was a problem with some of their earlier cartridges. So I'm definitely going to give the N64 the highest rank possible to go alongside the original Nintendo with an S. Alright, here's a fun one, the Pokemon Mini, and look how small it is. I mean, this was insane at the time, but these days the Switch cartridge is even smaller. These aren't really that great. For one thing, it has a weird plastic overlap only on one side, which I always thought was a bit strange. It does have a small grip though, which sticks out from the original system, so it's quite easy to pull out, but the plastic is the main issue. The plastic actually yellows quite easily. I don't think you'll be able to tell because of the camera here, but it is actually slightly yellowed already, and I'm sure that in a few years' time it's basically just going to look like yellowed plastic. So I think I'm actually going to give the Pokemon Mini a D. Now another interesting handheld, this time for the Bandai WonderSwan, and there's already a glaring issue with this that I'm sure you will see as soon as I hold this up to the camera. Yes, all the pins are exposed across the bottom. You can get these plastic protectors for the cartridges that you put in like that, but then you can't really see the label that clearly, and it's just cumbersome if you've got a bunch of these and you need to pull them in and out each time. So although I do like the shape and the design of these WonderSwan cartridges, like, they look really cool and there's a nice big space there for the artwork, but in terms of the actual design, I don't understand why they had it so that just the bottom of the cartridge slips into the console. It would have been better just to have the entire thing like the Game Boy Advance and just make it a bit wider, honestly. So I'm going to give the WonderSwan a C. Let's take a look at the Geo Pocket colour next, and I'm not really sure what to think of these. I like the size and the feel of it, but I feel like the label doesn't really give the game much room to have any actual artwork. You're just getting the game title and a bunch of random information all the way around. And also, for some reason, on the bottom, it's actually split in two with a bit of plastic in the middle, so I've got no idea why that is. Although it doesn't show the pins, I don't really think this is any better or worse than the WonderSwan, so I'm going to give it a C as well. Next up is the Atari Lynx, and this is a weird one because at first I just pulled out one cartridge like I did with all the others, but then I remembered they're all slightly different, so depending on when these cartridges were made, they have very subtle differences. So I've got two here. This one has little like bubbles on the back so you can grip onto them to pull it out. This one instead has a folding lip that you then use that to pull out instead. So for some of them you can easily stack them up because they're flat, but other ones they have this ridge on the back and you can't do anything with them. So it's very weird. I do like the size of them and I like the shape and the thinness of it, and I like the fact that there's enough room there to display the image. So I'm actually going to give these, despite their weird quirks, I'm going to give these a B, which is slightly higher than the WonderSwan and the Neo Geo. I do think it's the best out of those three sort of secondary handheld consoles. We've got 4 left now. Let's take a look at the Atari 2600. The first thing that immediately pops into my mind when I'm looking at the Atari 2600 games is the fact that the picture is upside down. The pins are there on the bottom, so when you put it in the console, it's looking up, which doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm sure that you put the games in that way around, so why would you want it so that the picture's upside down? I will admit it is a nice size, and it doesn't feel quite as nice as like the NES or the SNES, but it does feel quite good. It's got kind of a rough texture to it, and it does have a picture on the top as well. I'm just really confused why that's the wrong way around. Let me know in the comments below why they decided to put the image on in that direction. I think I'm going to give this a C as well. Next is the Sega Mega Drive or Sega Genesis, and honestly I can't think of a single fault with these cartridges. It's a nostalgic looking cartridge for one thing. It feels great, it's really sturdy, doesn't rattle at all. It has the name of the game at the top, which I love. It has a great amount of artwork on the front compared to the size of the cartridge. There really is nothing wrong with this. This is going straight into the S rank. 2 left now, and the next one is the Famicom, which was Nintendo's first proper game cartridge. And although I do love them, I love the size and the colours, there really is no uniformity between them at all. I've got a bunch of Famicom games here, and they all look completely different. Like this one here by Bandai, for example, has these rounded edges here. It also has some extra pictures on the back. It has the name of the game at the top. It has these edges here, these ridged edges. And it just looks completely different compared to Super Mario here. Like, if you saw these two side by side, you might not even think that they're from the same console. Just look at how different and unique these look. And that's not where it ends. You also get these plain black ones, which for some reason also have a little hole in the corner there. Don't know whether you can see that on camera. But yeah, it's just so strange. Like this one, the label actually goes all the way around to the back. And then you have some like this, which are like twice the size of a regular cartridge for no apparent reason. These ones look more similar to the NES cartridges that you get here in the UK. It's even kind of got that cutout rectangle there, so there's a completely different design again. And this one doesn't have the name of the game at the top. And then you have some which are just different shades of the same style cartridge, again with no name at the top. And then you get some which are like completely over the top, like this gold one here. So I really don't know how to rate this one because there's just so many different versions of this cartridge. They all belong in different tiers in my opinion. So I'm going to stick with like the generic Famicom cartridge here and give it a C. And then everything else can either go up or down from that. Let me know whether you think that's fair or not in the comments below. Just to prove my point there, I put a few of them in too. And finally, Nintendo's latest cartridge, going from their first to their most recent. This is the Switch cartridge, and yeah, you can barely see it. And I don't know whether I should do that. I'll save it until the end. Apparently they taste bad too. So I am not a fan of the Switch cartridges. I think they're far too small. They're fragile. They rattle. They're so easy to lose. I know the Switch is a handheld and it's cool to have a really compact cartridge like this, but I even thought the DS carts were too small. I would love to see Nintendo to return to something along the same size as the Game Boy Advance. I really do feel like the Game Boy Advance is the perfect size for a handheld. Like, it's not any thicker than what the Switch is. You could easily fit a cartridge like that in the back of the Switch, and imagine how much more space they could put on there. I guess it's cheaper to make these because they're smaller, but I'm really not a fan, so it's getting a D, and I guess because this is the end of the video, I need to find out how I rate the taste as well, so I'm actually really nervous about doing this. I've put this off for like, well, I don't know when the Switch came out, 2017 now, so like 6 years. Here goes nothing. Okay, that is sour. And it lingers. Ugh. Oh no, I haven't got a drink either. Oh my god, I regret that so much. It's getting a it's getting an E for the taste alone. And that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Check out some more tier lists up there.